Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. For those of you who have seen some of my previous videos, you will know that one of my 2025 goals was to actually find some poetry that I enjoy. So one of my goals has been to read a few poetry collections every single week, and then I just consolidate it into, or my review of those poetry collections into a once a week video, because I don't really have a lot to say about each individual one because I'm still trying to figure out what I enjoy in poetry, and I feel like I don't have enough content in each individual volume to fill an entire video. So in this video, we're going to review the poetry collections that I read last week. I read two. The first was Self-Portrait with Cephalopod by Catherine Smith. The second was Cry, Smile, Wonder by David Sarnacki. So these are the two collections that I read last week, so I'm going to be talking about them in this video. If you housekeeping notes, I guess, before we get started. If you don't care, you can skip like 30 seconds ahead. First of all, look how much longer my hair has gotten. I'm so pleased. I have no one to share this with in real life, but I'm very pleased with my hair progress. If you look at my old videos, you'll see how short it is. And I'm growing it all the way back out. I don't actually like the current length overall. Like, I would never cut it to this length, but the progress from where I started to where I am, I'm very pleased with. Two, this lighting is not the best and I need to work on that. It makes me look very, very terrible, but I'm still working on the lighting. Three, I have a lot of book reviews that I need to film. I have a whole stack right next to me, and I'm actually going to be able to get to it this week because I crunched up my knee pretty good playing basketball on Thursday. So it's kind of swollen and ouchy. So I'm gonna have to like be off my feet for a little bit. I don't think I did anything serious. It already feels a lot better from Thursday. Thursday was pretty rough, but it feels pretty okay today. But I'm gonna have a lot of time to film, so great news for you guys. Now let's dive into the two poetry collections that I read. We'll start with Self-Portrait with Cephalopod by Catherine Smith. This was labeled as a Jake Adam York Prize, selected by Francine J. Harris, and admittedly I went into this collection completely blind. I liked the title, I flipped through it and discovered that there were some things that looked promising. I wasn't even familiar with the prize labeled on the cover, but I decided to take it home and give it a read because it seemed okay at first glance. Something that I have noticed, because part of this challenge is for me to figure out what I like and don't like in poetry, which I feel like is an entirely different, or an entire beast, because there seems to be so much in the genre, or I don't know if genre is the right word for this, but in the medium, in the style of writing, that it's not really conceivable for me to dislike everything in poetry. I don't find that true. And I do find, like, I read poetry in my English and literature classes in high school, and I enjoyed some of that. But of the modern stuff, I'm not really sure what I like. There was a, one of the viewers did comment a list of specific poems to check out, and I do have that list copied and saved in my reader recommendation Excel spreadsheet because I am a spreadsheet girl. So I do have some things, but if I remember, that list also included a lot of like the classics or the older ones, which I already know I do tend to like those. I'm just trying to figure out the modern ones. So those were great suggestions and I will get to reading those, but I'm also going to continue to hunt for new stuff, newer stuff, contemporary stuff, I guess you could say, that I enjoy. I find in poetry, this is all to say, that when I can't visualize what's being said on the page, I tend to really not like it. It's very, when it's very ethereal and conceptual, it's not really my favorite. And maybe I'm just not like an advanced poetry reader. I'm not an advanced reader of poetry. I don't exist on those higher planes to understand what's going on in this conceptual poetry. But if I can't visualize it, I'm out. I tend to think it's very, and this isn't very book review proper of me, but sometimes I find myself rolling my eyes. There's also a part of me, and maybe this is a bigger discussion, where like, if your viewer doesn't understand the art, or in this case, if your reader doesn't understand the art, what is the point? Is the point of art to communicate something, or is it to get something out of yourself? Which I feel like that's like a whole bigger discussion, which is not the point of my channel, and even if it was, I would not do a good job conveying my thoughts and opinions of it. But if I'm the reader and I'm not getting anything out of your poetry, I'm not saying that you're a bad poet, but I am saying that your poetry is probably not for me. And I actually had a very positive interaction with Self-Portrait with Cephalopod. I felt like I could visualize everything in this poetry collection. Everything felt substantial. I think that's a good word I'm looking for. It felt substantial. It felt like something I could visualize. It felt like something I could relate to. It didn't feel very ethereal. Even when talking about more serious things, it felt like I could get my hands on what was on the page and visualize it and understand it, which is the most important thing for me and something that I'm finding I really, really enjoy. When I was in the library, I did breeze through it to see if it looked like it was something that was easy to visualize, so I kind of went in with that basis that in my flip through of this poetry collection, it seemed understandable. And I did find it quite understandable overall. So I think that was true. This book has a very heavy nature emphasis and the ways that humans interact with nature, both positively, a lot of connections or similarities we have with nature, as well as the ways that humans have throughout time, of course, also abused nature. So how humans interact with the natural world is a heavy portrait or heavy emphasis of this book. There seems to be like a lot of litter and plastic, almost referencing microplastics on the cover. The cover was one of the things that drew me to the book, and I felt like the cover did tie in with the poetry in the book itself, which was also very, very positive, because sometimes, and I find this with the conceptual stuff, the cover also is just really out there. So I did like this. I will say that overall there was no one poem that rose above the others, but every poem in the book was good. It wasn't like I was reading, that one was okay, this one was a little better. Everything felt like consistently at a good level. I would say for a random poetry collection pulled off the shelf, I would probably give, let's say, average. If I just go into the library and pull one off the shelf, it's probably going to be a 2-star. It really probably isn't going to connect with me. I would consider a positive interaction with a poetry collection one that I would give a 3-star. I can at least visualize it and I can understand what's going on. This one I would probably give a 4-star, which means that this is probably one of the top runners for a good poetry collection so far. Again, though, there's not one poem in here that rose to the top, but this one overall felt very solid. And well, I do not know what the criteria for this Jake Adam York Prize was. I do feel like it felt like good, high quality poetry from someone who has no clue what they're talking about. So overall, I had a very, very positive interaction with this book. The other one I'm just saving for last because it was technically a reread. I actually read this collection back in 2019. So I knew I was liking this going into it. This is, again, one that's very, very accessible. It's very, very easy to visualize. This is the one when I read this again back in 2019, I remember liking it. And I was like, oh, then maybe poetry is interesting. And then I immediately started trying to find other poetry that I liked, and I didn't like a lot of the other stuff that I read over the next couple of years. So this was kind of the catalyst where I was like, okay, this is like, if this is fine, but other stuff isn't, what's the difference between poetry that I like and poetry that I don't? So this was a reread, so this was kind of cheating because I knew I was going to like it. I am kind of using this as like the reward. I told myself if I read this one, I could read this one. I feel like I am, even though they're very small and easy to read. I do find that I struggle to reach for them. I don't naturally reach for them because I just anticipate not liking it, even though I did like this one. So I told myself if I read this one, I could read this one again. So I kind of used this one to pair with it to bring these two together. So that's what I did with this one. I actually had a very positive week for poetry. I do have a couple more, 1 or 2 left from this library haul that I can read this week, but I am trying to divide those up and put them in different weeks. So I will have a little bit more poetry to read next week. If you guys always have any comments or commentary, I will say one more thing just on the poetry part in general. I actually went to a poetry reading at a local coffee shop a little bit ago. I mean, not like a little bit ago today, like within the last 2 weeks or so. And I do think that maybe listening to someone read a poem that they wrote with the inflection and the tone and the cadence that they want maybe also improves the quality of it, because there were some good poems that were read, they were self-written, and again, I did find myself more drawn to the ones that were more like concrete and substantial versus the conceptual ones that I just found myself kind of like not understanding as much. But I did do that, which I also felt like counted towards my poetry challenge, even though it's not a book, so it's not going towards my book reading challenge. If you have any thoughts or comments on the poetry collections I've read, or would like to recommend anything, or have any thoughts that you may have noticed, any patterns you may notice in my reading that I may not be able to see as an outside observer. Sometimes people have different opinions or are able to see things before someone else. So please leave that in the comment section down below. I love receiving your comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.